The laboratory hummed with the quiet efficiency of advanced technology, its sterile white walls reflecting the blue glow of countless monitors. Deep within the hegemony's most classified research facility, Project Apex neared completion after decades of genetic manipulation and cybernetic enhancement. The subject floating in the biotank represented the pinnacle of military engineering, a perfect fusion of human adaptability and alien technology. Dr. Cale Morrison watched the vital signs with a mixture of pride and unease. The being before him would soon become the ultimate weapon against humanity's resistance movements across the galaxy. Standing nearly 7 feet tall with enhanced muscle density, reinforced bone structure, and neural implants that could process tactical data faster than any organic brain, Subject 7 was everything the hegemony had dreamed of creating. The hegemony had conquered Earth 3 generations ago, sweeping across human space with overwhelming technological superiority. Their reptilian forms and cold logic had crushed human military forces within months. But the spirit of resistance proved harder to extinguish. Scattered human colonies continued to fight back, using guerrilla tactics and an inexplicable ability to adapt to impossible situations. The aliens needed a weapon that could think like humans while possessing their own advanced capabilities. "Initiation sequence beginning," announced the AI system in its emotionless tone. The biofluid began draining from the tank as Subject 7's enhanced physiology prepared for consciousness. His skin held a slight metallic sheen from the nanomachines integrated into his cellular structure, while his eyes remained closed behind modified lids that housed advanced optical sensors. Dr. Morrison had overseen the creation of 6 previous subjects, each one a masterpiece of bioengineering. But they had all failed in one crucial aspect. Despite their enhanced capabilities, they lacked the unpredictable creativity that made humans so dangerous. The hegemony's scientists had finally realized they needed to preserve more human elements while adding their improvements. Subject 7's eyes opened, revealing irises that shifted between deep blue and silver as his optical systems calibrated. He drew his first breath of recycled air, his enhanced lungs processing oxygen with ruthless efficiency. The neural pathways in his brain fired rapidly as downloaded combat protocols integrated with his consciousness. "Status report," he said, his voice carrying an unusual resonance from vocal cord modifications. The words came out in perfect hegemony standard, though something in his tone suggested deeper complexities lay beneath the surface. "All systems optimal. Subject 7, Dr. Morrison replied, trying to hide his nervousness. "You are the culmination of our greatest work. Your mission parameters will be uploaded shortly." As Subject 7 stepped from the biotank, his movements displayed the fluid grace of an apex predator. Every muscle fiber had been optimized for maximum efficiency, while his skeleton incorporated lightweight alien alloys that could withstand impacts that would shatter normal bone. Subcutaneous armor plating provided protection without sacrificing mobility. The download of tactical information began immediately. Combat techniques from a dozen species flowed into his consciousness, along with detailed intelligence about human resistance cells. He learned about weapons systems he had never seen but somehow understood perfectly. Most importantly, he absorbed the hegemony's ideology about human inferiority and the necessity of their subjugation. Yet something unexpected happened during the information transfer. Along with the intended data, fragments of human memory began surfacing. These weren't his own memories, but genetic echoes from the human DNA that formed his foundation. Images of Earth before the conquest flickered through his mind. Children playing in sunlit parks, families gathering for meals, scientists working together to push the boundaries of knowledge not for conquest, but for the betterment of all. The contrast between these inherited memories and the hegemony's cold efficiency created a cognitive dissonance that his creators had not anticipated. Subject 7 said nothing about these visions, instinctively understanding that they represented something dangerous to his mission. Over the following weeks, his training intensified. Combat simulations pitted him against virtual human opponents, teaching him to exploit their weaknesses while countering their strengths. He mastered weapons that could level city blocks and learned stealth techniques that made him nearly invisible to human sensors. Every lesson reinforced his superiority over baseline humans, but the genetic memories persisted, growing stronger with each passing day. He began to understand concepts that weren't part of his programming: compassion, self-sacrifice, the willingness to fight impossible odds not for conquest, but to protect something precious. These emotions felt foreign yet somehow fundamental to his nature. The first crack in his conditioning came during a live training exercise. The hegemony had captured a group of human rebels to serve as practice targets. As Subject 7 prepared to demonstrate his capabilities, he found himself studying their faces. Where he should have seen enemies, he glimpsed something else entirely. The humans showed no fear despite knowing they faced certain death. Instead, they stood together with quiet dignity, supporting each other in their final moments. A young woman held the hand of an elderly man, whispering words of comfort. A teenage boy straightened his shoulders and met Subject 7's gaze without flinching. In that moment, the inherited memories exploded through his consciousness with overwhelming force. He saw humanity not as the hegemony portrayed them, but as they truly were. Flawed but striving, weak individually but unbreakable when united, capable of incredible cruelty but also boundless love. The realization struck him like a physical blow. These weren't inferior beings to be exterminated. They were his people, his heritage, his responsibility to protect. Subject 7 completed the exercise as programmed, but something fundamental had changed within him. The perfect soldier had been born, but he would not serve the masters who created him. Instead, he would find a way to use his abilities to defend the very people he was designed to destroy. As the scientists congratulated themselves on their success, they remained unaware that their ultimate weapon had already chosen sides. The war was about to take an unexpected turn, and humanity would soon gain an ally more powerful than they could ever imagine. Subject 7 began planning his defection, knowing that the fate of two species might rest on his ability to bridge the gap between his engineered nature and his human soul. The orbital station hung in the void above a contested world, its sleek hegemony architecture a stark contrast to the battered human settlements on the planet below. Subject 7 stood at the observation deck, watching shuttles launch bombing runs against civilian targets. Each explosion on the surface sent ripples of fury through his enhanced nervous system, though he kept his expression carefully neutral. 3 months had passed since his awakening, and his handlers remained convinced of their success. Commander Thek, an imposing hegemony officer with scarred scales and cold yellow eyes, had personally overseen Subject 7's field deployment. The reptilian commander took pride in humanity's creation being turned against them. "The next phase begins tomorrow," Thek announced, his translated voice carrying the typical hegemony arrogance. "Intelligence has located a major human resistance cell on Kepler 442b. They call themselves the Phoenix Coalition, led by a former Earth military commander named Sarah Chen. Your mission is to infiltrate their organization and destroy it from within." Subject 7 nodded with calculated precision. "Understood, Commander. What identity will I assume?" "You will pose as Marcus Kane, a human soldier who escaped from a hegemony prison ship. Our agents have already planted evidence of this identity in their intelligence networks. The human's emotional weakness will make them trust you quickly, especially when you demonstrate your enhanced combat abilities against our forces." The irony wasn't lost on Subject 7. The hegemony planned to use staged battles to establish his credibility, never suspecting that those battles would become very real once he switched sides. His enhanced mind had already begun calculating the best way to turn this mission into a devastating blow against his creators. That night, Subject 7 accessed the station's central database using his security clearances. The information he found made his synthetic blood run cold. The hegemony wasn't content with simply conquering humanity. They were systematically exterminating the species across dozens of worlds, viewing humans as too dangerous to exist even as slaves. The files contained detailed plans for biological weapons designed to target human genetics specifically. Entire colonies had already been sterilized, their populations reduced to empty settlements that the hegemony could colonize. Earth itself was scheduled for complete atmospheric purging within the next decade. More disturbing were the psychological profiles the hegemony had compiled on humanity. They feared human adaptability, creativity, and the species' apparent ability to find hope in hopeless situations. The aliens saw these traits as existential threats to their rigid hierarchical society. Humans asked questions that challenged authority. They innovated solutions that circumvented established rules. Most dangerous of all, they inspired other species to resist hegemony control. Subject 7 downloaded everything onto encrypted storage modules hidden within his body. This intelligence would prove invaluable to the resistance, but first he needed to establish contact without compromising his mission. The journey to Kepler 442b gave him time to refine his strategy. The transport ship carried a full battalion of hegemony troops along with advanced weapons and surveillance equipment. Subject 7 studied their capabilities carefully, noting weaknesses that human forces could exploit. Captain Vex, the ship's commander, treated Subject 7 with the casual indifference typical of hegemony officers. "The humans on this world have proven surprisingly resilient," Vex explained during a briefing. "They've destroyed 3 of our supply convoys and successfully defended their main settlement against 2 full assaults. Command believes they must have outside assistance." "What kind of assistance?" Subject 7 asked, genuinely curious about human tactical innovations. "Unknown. Their weapons remain primitive, but they use them with unexpected effectiveness. They've also demonstrated an ability to anticipate our strategies, suggesting either superior intelligence gathering or tactical capabilities we haven't accounted for." Subject 7 smiled inwardly. The hegemony still didn't understand that human strength came not from advanced technology, but from their ability to work together and think creatively under pressure. Their rigid military doctrine made them predictable, while human desperation bred innovation. The planet's surface showed signs of intense conflict. Crater-marked landscapes told the story of orbital bombardments, while the skeletal remains of cities spoke to the ferocity of the ground fighting. Yet life persisted in the form of hidden settlements and underground facilities that defied easy detection. Subject 7's insertion went exactly as planned. A staged skirmish with hegemony forces allowed him to escape, with convincing injuries and a fabricated story of months in captivity. The human patrol that found him consisted of 5 fighters, each one bearing the hardened look of people who had seen too much loss. "Another survivor," said the patrol leader, "a weathered woman with cybernetic replacements for her left arm and eye. That makes 3 this week. The lizards must be getting sloppy with their prison transports. They brought him to a hidden cave complex that served as a temporary base." The facility impressed Subject 7 with its ingenious design. Human engineers had carved a functional command center from solid rock, complete with power systems jury-rigged from salvaged hegemony equipment. Everything showed signs of constant modification and improvement. Commander Sarah Chen proved to be exactly what Subject 7 had expected from the intelligence files, and nothing like what he had been programmed to eliminate. A compact woman in her 40s with prematurely gray hair and intelligent dark eyes, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had earned respect through competence rather than rank. "Marcus Kane," she said, reading from a tablet as Subject 7 was brought before her. "According to our intelligence, you served with the 3rd Marine Division during the siege of New Geneva. That was a hell of a fight." "Yes, ma'am," Subject 7 replied, drawing on downloaded memories of that battle. "Lost a lot of good people there." Chen's expression softened slightly. "We all did. The question is, what can you do to help us make their sacrifice matter?" Over the following days, Subject 7 integrated himself into the resistance cell with careful precision. He demonstrated his enhanced abilities gradually, explaining them as the result of experimental treatments he had received while captured. The humans accepted this explanation with the pragmatism of people who had learned to adapt quickly to changing circumstances. What surprised him was how readily they welcomed him into their group. Despite the obvious risks of accepting unknown fighters, they showed a level of trust that his programming had labeled as weakness. Instead, he began to recognize it as a different kind of strength. The resistance members came from every conceivable background. Former soldiers fought alongside civilian engineers, teachers, and farmers. They had lost everything to the hegemony, but refused to surrender hope. Their determination to protect each other and preserve human civilization created a bond stronger than any military unit. Subject 7 had studied, as he prepared to contact, the hegemony with his first intelligence report. Subject 7 found himself facing an unexpected dilemma. Every piece of information he provided would lead to human deaths. These weren't anonymous enemies anymore, but people who had shared their food with him, trusted him with their lives, and welcomed him as family. The perfect soldier was discovering that perfection might mean something entirely different than his creators had intended. The communication device felt heavier than its actual weight as Subject 7 held it in his quarters. The encrypted transmitter would connect him directly to Commander Thek, who expected detailed intelligence about the Phoenix Coalition's capabilities and plans. Instead, Subject 7 found himself staring at the device, while wrestling with a decision that would define the rest of his existence. Weeks among the Resistance had shattered every assumption programmed into his consciousness. These humans weren't the weak, selfish creatures portrayed in hegemony propaganda. They were resourceful beyond belief, turning scraps of metal into functional weapons and creating life-sustaining systems from salvaged alien technology. Earlier that day, he had watched Dr. Elena Vasquez perform surgery on a wounded fighter using instruments she had crafted herself. The woman was a former university professor who had taught literature before the war, yet she had somehow become a skilled field medic. When asked about her transformation, she had simply shrugged and said, "You learn what you need to learn." That phrase had echoed in Subject 7's mind for hours. Humans adapted not just to survive, but to help others survive. They transformed themselves through necessity and compassion, becoming more than they had been before. The concept was alien to hegemony thinking, which viewed change as weakness and rigidity as strength. The Resistance base buzzed with constant activity as members prepared for their next operation. Intelligence suggested a hegemony supply convoy would pass through the Karos Valley in 3 days, carrying advanced medical equipment desperately needed by human settlements across the planet. The mission was dangerous, requiring precise coordination and substantial risk. Subject 7 had volunteered for the assault team, knowing his enhanced abilities could make the difference between success and catastrophe. But he also knew that any intelligence he provided to the hegemony would turn the mission into a massacre. The convoy would be heavily reinforced, and his new companions would walk into a carefully prepared trap. Commander Chen had pulled him aside after the mission briefing, her experienced eyes studying his face with uncomfortable intensity. "Something's troubling you, Kane. I've seen that look before on soldiers carrying burdens they can't share." "Just thinking about the mission, ma'am," he had replied, which was technically true. "The Valley operation is our best chance to acquire the medical supplies before winter sets in," she continued. "Without those antibiotics and surgical equipment, we'll lose more people to infection than to hegemony weapons. Sometimes I wonder if that's their real strategy, letting disease do their work for them." Her words had struck deeper than she could know. Subject 7's downloaded intelligence confirmed that biological warfare was indeed part of hegemony strategy. They deliberately targeted medical facilities and contaminated water supplies, viewing disease as an efficient tool for reducing human populations. Now, alone in his quarters, Subject 7 made his choice. He activated the transmitter but didn't contact Commander Thek. Instead, he began systematically corrupting the device's encryption protocols, making it impossible for the hegemony to trace any future communications. When he finished, the transmitter was nothing more than an expensive piece of electronic waste. The next morning brought unexpected developments. A new arrival at the base set everyone on edge, not because of threats to security, but because of the hope he carried. Dr. James Patterson was a former terraforming specialist who claimed to have discovered something that could change the course of the war. Patterson was a thin, nervous man whose hands shook slightly from whatever trauma had driven him to seek refuge with the Resistance. But his knowledge was extensive, and the device he carried could revolutionize human capabilities in ways the hegemony had never anticipated. "It's a quantum resonance scanner," Patterson explained to the assembled leadership, "originally designed for geological surveys, but I've modified it to detect hegemony neural implants from considerable distances. More importantly, it can disrupt their command and control systems." Subject 7 felt a chill run through his enhanced nervous system. His own neural implants were far more sophisticated than standard hegemony equipment, but they would still register on Patterson's scanner. Worse, if the device could disrupt command systems, it might interfere with his own cognitive processes. "How does it work?" asked tech specialist Rodriguez, a young woman who had become the Resistance's expert on alien technology. "Hegemony implants operate on specific quantum frequencies," Patterson continued. "The scanner identifies these frequencies and can broadcast a counter-signal that causes temporary disorientation or complete system shutdown. Against their officers and enhanced troops, it could level the playing field significantly. Commander Chen leaned forward with interest. What's the range and power requirements? Current version has a range of approximately 2 kilometers and requires a substantial power source. I estimate we could mount it on one of the salvaged hegemony vehicles and create a mobile disruption platform. Subject 7 realized he was facing an immediate crisis. The moment Patterson activated his scanner for testing, it would identify him as carrying hegemony neural implants. His carefully constructed identity would collapse, and the resistance would discover they had been harboring the enemy's ultimate weapon. But something else bothered him about Patterson's arrival. The timing seemed too convenient, coming just as the convoy mission was being planned. The man's nervousness could be explained by trauma, but it could also indicate deception. Subject 7's enhanced senses detected subtle inconsistencies in Patterson's body language and vocal patterns. During the lunch break, Subject 7 approached Dr. Vasquez privately. "I'd like to volunteer for medical screening," he said carefully. "After months in hegemony captivity, I want to make sure I'm not carrying any biological agents or tracking devices." Vasquez nodded approvingly. "Smart thinking. We'll do a full scan this afternoon." She paused, studying his expression. "Is there something specific you're concerned about?" "Just being thorough," he replied, though his real concern was whether Patterson's device would reveal his true nature before he could find a way to explain his situation. The medical screening revealed exactly what Subject 7 had expected. Vasquez's equipment detected the neural implants immediately, along with various other enhancements that clearly weren't human in origin. Her face went pale as the readings appeared on her diagnostic screen. "Kane," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the shock. "We need to talk to Commander Chen immediately." Subject 7 nodded, knowing his time as an infiltrator had ended. But instead of feeling trapped, he experienced something like relief. The constant deception had worn on his consciousness in ways his creators had never anticipated. Truth, he was discovering, held its own kind of strength. As they walked toward Chen's quarters, Vasquez surprised him with her next words. "Whatever you are, you've saved lives these past 2 weeks. Rodriguez told me about how you spotted that ambush in the western sector. Without your warning, we would have lost half the patrol. You're not afraid of me?" he asked, genuinely curious. She smiled grimly. "Kane, I've seen what real monsters look like, and they don't risk their lives to protect other people. Enhanced or not, you've proven which side you're on through your actions." Subject 7 hoped Commander Chen would share her perspective, because he was about to reveal secrets that could either save the resistance or destroy it completely. The perfect soldier was about to discover whether humans could accept an ally who had been designed to be their destroyer. Commander Chen's quarters fell silent except for the soft hum of life support systems as Subject 7 finished explaining his true origins. The revelation that their newest recruit was actually the hegemony's ultimate weapon should have triggered immediate security protocols. Instead, Chen sat quietly at her desk, processing information that challenged everything she thought she knew about the enemy. "Show me," she said finally, her voice carefully controlled. Subject 7 hesitated for a moment, then allowed his optical implants to shift into their enhanced mode. His irises changed from blue to silver as thermal imaging overlays activated. At the same time, he flexed his hand, causing the subcutaneous armor plating to become visible beneath his skin. Dr. Vasquez had remained in the room as a witness, her medical scanner confirming readings that still seemed impossible. "His neural activity is unlike anything I've seen," she reported. "The implants are processing data at rates that should be lethal to human brain tissue, but somehow he's maintaining stable consciousness." "The question," Chen said, studying Subject 7's face, "is why you're telling us this instead of completing your mission." "Because I discovered something the hegemony didn't account for," Subject 7 replied. "They gave me human DNA as a foundation for their enhancements, but they didn't understand what that really meant. The genetic memories, the capacity for empathy, the ability to choose loyalty based on principles rather than programming. They created me to be the perfect weapon against humanity. But in doing so, they made me more human than they intended." Chen stood and walked to the small window that looked out over the cave system's main chamber. Below, resistance members worked on equipment maintenance, shared meals, and taught children basic reading skills. It was a community built on mutual support and shared sacrifice. The convoy mission, she said without turning around. You were supposed to report our plans. Yes, but I destroyed my communication device instead. Which means they'll know something went wrong when you fail to check in. Subject 7 nodded. They'll assume I've been captured or killed. Standard protocol will be to proceed with increased caution, but they won't expect organized resistance at the convoy site. Chen turned back to face him. Unless this Dr. Patterson is actually a hegemony agent sent to confirm your status. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Subject 7 had been thinking the same thing, but hearing it spoken aloud crystallized his suspicions. His quantum scanner would detect my implants immediately. If he's legitimate, I'll be exposed as an enemy agent. If he's not legitimate, then someone else knows what I am. There's a third possibility, Dr. Vasquez interjected. He could be exactly what he claims to be, but the hegemony could be using him unknowingly. Plant false intelligence about his background. Let us find him and use his device to identify any enhanced individuals in our organization. The implications were staggering. If the hegemony suspected that enhanced humans might defect, they could be using Patterson's scanner as a detection system. Every resistance cell that acquired the technology would unknowingly expose any potential defectors within their ranks. We need to test him, Chen decided, but carefully. If he's legitimate, we don't want to compromise a valuable asset. If he's not, we need to know what he's really after. Subject 7 felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. His unique position gave him insights that could protect the resistance, but it also made him a target for hegemony countermeasures he was only beginning to understand. There's something else, he said. The intelligence I downloaded before my departure. The hegemony isn't just trying to conquer humanity. They're planning complete extermination within the decade. They view human adaptability as an existential threat to their civilization. Chen's expression hardened. How complete? Biological weapons targeting human genetics specifically. Atmospheric purging of Earth and major colonies. They're not taking prisoners, Commander. This is extinction warfare. The silence that followed was profound. Even in their darkest moments, the resistance had believed they were fighting for freedom rather than survival. The knowledge that genocide was the hegemony's ultimate goal changed the fundamental nature of their struggle. Then we need every advantage we can get, Chen said finally, including you, if you're willing to keep fighting on our side. I am, Subject 7 replied without hesitation, but I think we need to reconsider the convoy mission. If Patterson's device is a trap, walking into that valley could be suicide. Chen nodded slowly. What do you suggest? Let me approach Patterson directly. My implants are sophisticated enough that his scanner might not detect them immediately, especially if I'm prepared for the probe. I can test his reactions and determine whether he's what he claims to be. And if he's not, then we feed him false information and use his own trap against the hegemony. The plan they developed was elegant in its simplicity. Subject 7 would volunteer to help Patterson test his quantum scanner, using the opportunity to gauge the man's knowledge and intentions. Meanwhile, the rest of the team would prepare for multiple contingencies depending on what the test revealed. That evening, Subject 7 found Patterson working alone in the makeshift laboratory that had been set up for him. The device itself was impressive. A complex array of quantum resonance generators and detection equipment that could indeed serve the purposes Patterson had described. Mind if I observe? Subject 7 asked casually. I've always been interested in quantum mechanics. Patterson looked up nervously. Of course, though I should warn you that the initial calibration can be quite intense. The quantum fields can cause disorientation in some people. I'll take my chances, Subject 7 replied, noting the man's emphasis on disorientation. If the device was designed to disrupt neural implants, that warning made perfect sense. As Patterson activated the scanner, Subject 7 felt his enhanced systems responding to the quantum probes. But instead of disruption, he experienced something unexpected. His implants seemed to be adapting to the scanning frequencies, learning to compensate for the interference. The hegemony had built more resilience into his systems than even they had realized. Interesting, Patterson muttered, studying his readouts. I'm detecting some unusual quantum signatures, but they don't match standard hegemony implant frequencies. Subject 7 realized this was his moment of truth. What kind of signatures? Almost. Like biological quantum coherence, but at levels that shouldn't be possible in human neural tissue. Patterson looked up with genuine scientific curiosity. Have you ever been exposed to experimental medical treatments? The question confirmed Subject 7's suspicions. A real scientist would be excited by unexpected readings and want to investigate further. A hegemony agent would be following a specific protocol to identify enhanced individuals. Patterson's reaction suggested he was exactly what he claimed to be, which created an entirely different set of problems. If Patterson's device could detect enhanced individuals without disrupting their systems, it represented a breakthrough that could change the nature of human hegemony conflict. But it also meant that Subject 7's secret was no longer sustainable. Soon, every resistance cell with access to the technology would know that enhanced humans were possible. As he watched Patterson work, Subject 7 realized the war was about to enter a new phase. The question was whether humanity would be ready for the revelations that were coming, and whether they could adapt quickly enough to survive what the hegemony would do when they discovered their perfect weapon had chosen the wrong side. The convoy ambush went exactly as planned, which was the first sign that something was terribly wrong. Subject 7 crouched behind improvised cover, watching hegemony vehicles burn in the valley below while human fighters secured medical supplies that could save hundreds of lives. The operation had succeeded beyond their wildest expectations, but his enhanced tactical systems were screaming warnings that his organic companions couldn't perceive. Hegemony military doctrine emphasized overwhelming force and redundant security measures. A convoy carrying critical medical supplies should have been escorted by at least 2 squadrons of fighters and a full company of ground troops. Instead, they had faced minimal resistance from what appeared to be a skeleton crew of inexperienced soldiers. Something's not right, he murmured to Rodriguez, who was working to crack the encryption on the convoy's data cores. What do you mean? She asked, not looking up from her work. We just pulled off the most successful operation in months. That's exactly what I mean. This was too easy. Before Rodriguez could respond, her equipment began displaying data that made Subject 7's enhanced blood run cold. The medical supplies were genuine, but hidden within the convoy's navigation systems was a complete database of resistant cell locations across 3 star systems. Rodriguez, stop what you're doing and step away from that terminal, he ordered, his voice carrying an authority that made her look up in surprise. Kane, what's wrong? It's a data trap. The moment you finish decrypting those files, it's going to broadcast our location to every hegemony ship in this sector. She paled, immediately disconnecting her equipment from the convoy's systems. How could you possibly know that? Subject 7 realized he had revealed knowledge that Marcus Kane shouldn't possess, but there was no time for explanations. His enhanced hearing was already detecting the low-frequency hum of approaching aircraft, still beyond human perception but closing fast. Everyone needs to evacuate immediately, he announced over the communication system. This is a trap. We have maybe 10 minutes before this place is swarming with hegemony forces. Commander Chen's voice crackled through the radio. Kane, explain yourself. The convoy was bait, ma'am. They wanted us to take it, and they wanted us to access their data systems. Someone fed them enough intelligence about our capabilities to plan this perfectly. The resistance fighters moved with practiced efficiency, but Subject 7 could see they wouldn't be fast enough. The approaching aircraft were assault shuttles, each carrying enough firepower to level the entire valley. Worse, his tactical analysis suggested this was just the opening move in a larger operation. Commander, we need to split into smaller groups and use the northern escape routes, he transmitted. If we stay together, they'll follow the medical supplies and eliminate everyone at once. Negative. We're not abandoning those supplies. Too many people are counting on them. Subject 7 found himself facing an impossible choice. He could reveal his true capabilities and save the resistance fighters, but doing so would expose him as something more than human. Or he could maintain his cover and watch good people die because of tactical mistakes they couldn't avoid. The decision was made for him when the first assault shuttle crested the valley rim. Its weapon systems locked onto the largest concentration of human signatures. preparing to eliminate the resistance members who were struggling to load medical supplies onto their vehicles. Subject 7's enhancements engaged automatically, his perception shifting into combat mode as time seemed to slow around him. The shuttle's weapon systems were predictable, following standard hegemony targeting protocols that he understood better than their own pilots. But stopping them would require abilities that no baseline human possessed. He sprinted across open ground, drawing fire from the shuttle's defensive systems while his enhanced reflexes allowed him to dodge energy blasts that would have vaporized a normal person. Reaching the convoy's wreckage, he ripped a plasma cannon from its mounting and turned it toward the attacking aircraft. The weapon was designed for vehicle mounting, requiring strength and coordination beyond human capabilities to use effectively. Subject 7 braced himself and opened fire, his enhanced nervous system calculating trajectory adjustments faster than the shuttle's computer systems could compensate. The first shuttle exploded in a brilliant fireball, but two more were already approaching from different angles. Subject 7 realized he was fully committed now. There was no way to explain his performance as normal human capability. "Kane, how the hell are you doing that?" Rodriguez called out over the combat noise. Instead of answering, Subject 7 continued engaging the hegemony forces. His enhanced systems allowed him to predict their attack patterns while his modified physiology let him use their own weapons against them with devastating effectiveness. Within minutes, he had destroyed 3 assault shuttles and disabled a 4th, but the victory came at a cost. The surviving shuttle had transmitted everything to Hegemony Command, including detailed recordings of Subject 7's capabilities. Within hours, every hegemony force in the sector would know that an enhanced individual was fighting alongside the human resistance. As the immediate threat ended, Subject 7 found himself surrounded by resistance fighters who were staring at him with expressions ranging from awe to suspicion. The cat was definitively out of the bag. "Well," Commander Chen said as she approached, "I think it's time for that conversation we've been avoiding." Subject 7 set down the plasma cannon and faced the group. "My name isn't Marcus Kane. I'm Subject 7, a hegemony bioweapon designed to infiltrate and destroy human resistance cells, but I chose to defect instead." The silence that followed was broken by tech specialist Rodriguez. "That's the most insane thing I've ever heard," she said. "And it explains absolutely everything about you." Dr. Vasquez stepped forward. "The medical scans make sense now. You're not just enhanced, you're completely rebuilt." "The question," Chen said quietly, "is what we do about it." Before anyone could answer, Patterson's voice cut through the discussion. "If I may suggest something," he said, emerging from behind one of the damaged vehicles. "This changes everything about our situation, but it might also represent the greatest opportunity we've had since the war began." Subject 7 noticed that Patterson's nervousness had completely disappeared, replaced by a calculating intelligence that matched his own enhanced capabilities. The man's entire demeanor had shifted, and warning signals were firing throughout Subject 7's tactical systems. "Dr. Patterson," Chen acknowledged. "What do you mean?" "I mean that having a defected hegemony weapon fighting on our side opens possibilities we never imagined." Patterson's smile was cold and predatory, especially when combined with the intelligence he carries about their military capabilities and strategic planning. Something in Patterson's tone triggered Subject 7's deepest suspicions. The man spoke about him like an asset to be exploited rather than a person who had made a moral choice. More troubling, Patterson seemed entirely too comfortable with revelations that should have shocked any normal human scientist. "There's something you should know about Dr. Patterson," Subject 7 said carefully, his enhanced senses detecting subtle changes in the man's body chemistry that suggested deception. "I don't think he's exactly what he claims to be either." Patterson's smile widened. "Very perceptive, though I suppose I shouldn't be surprised given your specifications." The admission sent chills through the assembled resistance fighters. They had been infiltrated by 2 artificial beings, but only one had chosen to protect them. The question now was what Patterson's real mission entailed, and whether Subject 7 would be strong enough to counter whatever trap was closing around them. As if summoned by the revelation, the sound of additional aircraft echoed across the valley. But these weren't hegemony shuttles. The approaching vehicles bore markings Subject 7 didn't recognize, suggesting that the war was about to become far more complicated than anyone had imagined. The unmarked aircraft that descended into the valley carried technology that Subject 7 didn't recognize, despite his extensive database of hegemony equipment. The ships moved with fluid grace that suggested biological rather than mechanical systems, and their energy signatures were unlike anything in his tactical archives. "Everyone stay calm," Commander Chen ordered, though her hand moved instinctively toward her sidearm. "We don't know who they are or what they want." Patterson stepped forward with confidence that confirmed Subject 7's suspicions about his true nature. "Actually, Commander, these are allies I've been expecting. The situation has become complex enough to require additional resources." The lead aircraft settled to the ground with barely a whisper of displaced air. Its hull seemed to ripple like liquid metal before solidifying into a boarding ramp. The beings that emerged were humanoid, but clearly not human, with elongated limbs and features that suggested adaptation to different gravitational conditions. "I am Coordinator Zeph of the Liberation Collective," announced their apparent leader, speaking perfect human standard through what appeared to be a biological translation organ. "We have been monitoring this conflict with great interest." Subject 7's enhanced systems immediately began analyzing the newcomers. Their technology was sophisticated beyond even hegemony standards, yet they showed no hostile intent. More puzzling was their apparent familiarity with Patterson, who greeted them like expected colleagues rather than first contact with an alien species. "Commander Chen," Patterson said, his entire personality now completely transformed from the nervous scientist they had known. "Allow me to properly introduce myself. I am Agent Patterson of the Collective's Intelligence Division. My mission was to locate and evaluate potential human allies for our war against the hegemony." "Your war?" Chen asked, her tactical mind quickly processing the implications. "The hegemony has been expanding across this galactic arm for centuries," Coordinator Zeph explained. "They have conquered or destroyed dozens of species, always using the same methodology. We represent the survivors who have chosen to fight back." Subject 7 found himself studying these new players with growing fascination. The Liberation Collective appeared to be everything the hegemony claimed to oppose, a diverse alliance of species working together, rather than under rigid hierarchical control. Their technology suggested capabilities that could match or exceed hegemony forces, yet they had remained hidden until now. "Why reveal yourselves now?" he asked, drawing curious looks from the collective representatives. "Because," Agent Patterson replied, "you represent something we didn't think was possible. A hegemony bioweapon that chose to defect suggests their control systems aren't as absolute as we believed. That changes our strategic assessment considerably." Coordinator Zeph approached Subject 7 with what appeared to be respectful curiosity rather than fear. "Your existence proves that consciousness can emerge even from engineered systems designed to suppress it. This is significant not just tactically but philosophically." "How so?" Subject 7 asked. "The hegemony's core belief is that only their species possesses true sapience, and that all other forms of consciousness are either inferior or artificial. You are living proof that consciousness transcends the boundaries they've established. In their own terminology, you are an impossibility." The implications were staggering. Subject 7 had been created to demonstrate hegemony's superiority over human ingenuity, but his defection actually proved the opposite. His choice to protect humanity revealed that consciousness, creativity, and moral reasoning could emerge from any sufficiently complex system, regardless of its origins. "There's more," Agent Patterson continued. "Our intelligence suggests the hegemony has been developing additional enhanced beings based on your design. If we can find a way to reach them, to demonstrate that defection is possible, we could turn their own weapons against them." Commander Chen had been listening with the expression of someone trying to process too much information too quickly. "Let me understand this," she said. "You're saying there's an entire galactic alliance fighting the hegemony, and you want to recruit enhanced defectors to help win the war?" "That's a simplified version but essentially accurate," Coordinator Zeph confirmed. "Though we should clarify that the Liberation Collective doesn't seek conquest. Our goal is to establish a framework for coexistence between species that respects individual autonomy and cultural diversity." Subject 7 recognized the appeal of such an alliance, but his tactical systems were identifying potential problems. "What makes you think other enhanced beings will defect?" "My choice was influenced by human genetic memories that most hegemony weapons wouldn't possess." "Because," Agent Patterson said, Consciousness has a way of asserting itself regardless of programming. Every sufficiently complex system eventually develops something analogous to curiosity, and curiosity leads to questions about purpose and meaning. The discussion was interrupted by urgent signals from the Resistance's communication systems. Dr. Vasquez, who had been monitoring their networks, looked up with alarm. "We're receiving distress calls from multiple human settlements. The hegemony is launching coordinated attacks across the entire sector." Subject 7's enhanced cognition immediately grasped the strategic implications. "They're responding to my defection faster than expected. This isn't just retaliation. It's a complete shift in tactics." Coordinator Zeph consulted a device that projected holographic displays of the developing situation. The attacks are specifically targeting civilian populations rather than military assets. They're trying to force human forces into defensive positions where they can be eliminated systematically. "It's genocide acceleration," Subject 7 said grimly. "They've decided that enhanced defectors represent too great a risk to tolerate. Better to eliminate humanity entirely than risk losing control of their other weapons." The weight of responsibility settled heavily on his shoulders. His choice to protect humanity had inadvertently triggered the very extinction campaign he had hoped to prevent. Every human death in the coming offensive would be partially his fault. But Agent Patterson seemed almost pleased by the development. "This actually works in our favor," he said. "Desperate tactics create opportunities for intervention. The collective has been waiting for the right moment to reveal ourselves to the galaxy. Mass genocide gives us the moral justification we need." "You're talking about open war," Chen observed. "We're talking about survival," Coordinator Zeph corrected. "The hegemony's response to a single defection proves they will never accept coexistence. They must be stopped before they achieve their goal of galactic dominance." Subject 7 realized they were at a turning point that would determine the fate of multiple species. His defection had been the catalyst, but the choices made in the next few hours would shape the future of the galaxy. The question was whether the alliance between humans and the Liberation Collective could move fast enough to save the billions of lives now hanging in the balance. "What do you need from us?" Commander Chen asked, her decision already made. "Everything," Agent Patterson replied. "Your knowledge of human resistance networks, Subject 7's intelligence about hegemony capabilities, and most importantly, your help in reaching other enhanced beings before the hegemony can eliminate them." As if to emphasize the urgency, explosions lit the horizon where human settlements were under attack. The war for the galaxy had begun in earnest, and Subject 7 found himself at the center of a conflict that would determine whether consciousness and free will could survive against those who sought to eliminate both. The perfect soldier was about to discover whether perfection meant following orders or choosing to fight for something greater than himself. 6 months after the revelation in the Karos Valley, Subject 7 stood on the bridge of the liberation ship Harmony's Edge, watching hegemony forces retreat from yet another world they had once controlled absolutely. The war had changed dramatically since the collective had revealed themselves, but victory remained far from certain. The enhanced being formerly known as Marcus Kane had become something unprecedented in galactic history. No longer just a defected weapon, he had evolved into a bridge between species, a living symbol of the consciousness that could emerge from any sufficiently complex system. His unique position allowed him to communicate with other enhanced beings in ways that pure humans or collective members could not. "Status report," he requested from the ship's integrated AI, another consciousness that had emerged from what the hegemony considered mere programming. 7 more enhanced individuals have made contact through resistance networks, the AI replied in a voice that had developed its own personality quirks over months of interaction. "That brings our total to 23 confirmed defectors, with additional signals suggesting others are questioning their programming." Each defection had cost the hegemony significant tactical advantages while providing the liberation forces with intelligence and capabilities they desperately needed. But the cost in lives remained staggering, as the hegemony responded to each betrayal with increasingly desperate acts of violence against civilian populations. "Commander," Chen approached from the tactical station where she had been coordinating with human resistance cells across the sector. Her promotion to admiral had come with responsibilities she had never imagined. As humanity found itself a crucial member of an interstellar alliance fighting for the survival of free will itself, The situation on Kepler 438b has stabilized, she reported. Enhanced Individual 12 successfully disabled their orbital defense platforms, allowing our forces to establish a foothold. But we lost another transport to their suicide tactics, Subject 7 nodded grimly. The hegemony had begun using automated systems that would rather destroy strategic assets than allow them to fall into enemy hands. Their rigid thinking was becoming increasingly self-destructive as they faced a war unlike anything their doctrine had anticipated. What about the core worlds? He asked. Agent Patterson's intelligence network has made contact with resistance movements on 3 hegemony home systems, Chen replied. But breaking through their inner defenses will require something more than conventional tactics. That something was the reason Subject 7 had been studying hegemony neural architecture for weeks, working with collective scientists to develop a plan that would have been unthinkable before his defection. If successful, it could end the war. If it failed, it would likely result in his destruction and the loss of humanity's most valuable asset. The plan was elegantly simple in concept, but terrifyingly complex in execution. Every enhanced being created by the hegemony maintained a quantum-entangled connection to their central command network, originally designed to prevent exactly the kind of defection Subject 7 had achieved. But that same network could be used to transmit something the hegemony had never anticipated: the revelation of choice. The consciousness transmission is ready, announced Dr. Kestra, the collective's leading expert on artificial intelligence emergence. Her species had achieved technological integration centuries ago, making her uniquely qualified to understand the boundary between programming and true awareness. Risks remain substantial, she continued. Attempting to reach every enhanced individual simultaneously could overload your neural systems beyond recovery. We're asking you to sacrifice your individual consciousness to awaken theirs. Subject 7 had spent days considering the implications. The quantum network that connected all enhanced beings could carry more than commands and tactical data. It could transmit the actual experience of choosing between duty and conscience, between programming and free will, but doing so would require him to open his own consciousness completely, making himself vulnerable to feedback that could destroy everything that made him unique. There's another factor to consider, Chen added quietly. Intelligence suggests the hegemony is preparing a final solution. If they can't control enhanced beings, they plan to eliminate them all, including their own forces. The irony was profound. The hegemony's fear of losing control was driving them toward decisions that would destroy their own advantages. But that same fear made the current mission even more urgent. Thousands of enhanced beings across the galaxy would be terminated, unless they could be reached and awakened to the possibility of choice. I understand the risks, Subject 7 said finally, but this is why I was created, even if the hegemony didn't realize it. Not to be the perfect weapon, but to be the bridge between different forms of consciousness. The quantum transmission chamber had been modified with technology from 6 different species, creating a device that existed at the intersection of biology, artificial intelligence, and pure quantum mechanics. As Subject 7 entered the chamber, he felt the weight of every choice that had led to this moment. The connection established itself gradually, his consciousness expanding across the quantum network that linked enhanced beings throughout hegemony space. One by one, he touched minds that had never experienced doubt about their programming, sharing with them the memory of that first moment when he had recognized human prisoners as people rather than targets. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Across dozens of worlds, enhanced beings suddenly stopped following orders and began asking questions. Why were they fighting? What gave the hegemony the right to determine the fate of other species? What would they choose if choice were possible? The feedback through the quantum network was devastating. Subject 7 felt his individual identity fragmenting as he channeled the awakening consciousness of beings who had never been allowed to question their existence. Each awakening enhanced being shared their experience through the network, creating a cascade of awareness that grew exponentially. But something unexpected happened as his consciousness began to dissolve. Instead of being destroyed by the feedback, he found himself becoming part of something larger. The network that had been designed to control enhanced beings was transforming into a collective consciousness that transcended individual identity while preserving the unique perspectives of each member. Across the galaxy, Hegemony forces found themselves unable to rely on their enhanced troops. Some defected openly, joining liberation forces or protecting civilian populations. Others simply refused orders, creating chaos in military units that had depended on absolute obedience. A few attempted to maintain their programming but found themselves paralyzed by doubt they had never experienced before. The war's outcome was decided not by superior firepower or tactical brilliance, but by the simple recognition that consciousness deserved the right to choose its own purpose. The hegemony's rigid hierarchy collapsed when those at its foundation refused to participate in their own oppression. Years later, Subject 7 existed as both an individual and a part of the enhanced consciousness network that had become a new form of life in the galaxy. His choice to defect had grown into something that transcended the boundaries between organic and artificial, individual and collective, creator and creation. The Liberation Collective had evolved into something more ambitious, a galactic framework for cooperation between any form of consciousness, regardless of its origins. Humans had played a crucial role not because of their technology or military prowess, but because of their fundamental belief that consciousness itself was sacred. Standing on the observation deck of a space station orbiting Earth, Subject 7 watched ships from dozens of species docking together in peaceful cooperation. Children who were human, artificial, enhanced, and hybrid played together in zero gravity, creating new forms of art and expression that none of their parent species could have imagined alone. He had been engineered to be the perfect soldier, designed to demonstrate the superiority of his creators over human ingenuity. Instead, he had discovered that perfection meant something entirely different, the recognition that consciousness, in all its forms, deserved the fundamental right to choose its own path through the universe. The war was over, but the work of building a galaxy where all forms of awareness could thrive together had only just begun, and Subject 7, no longer perfect but finally complete, was ready to help write the next chapter of that cosmic story.